Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's NAC at Home program. My name is Nadine Heidinger, and I'm the Director of Marketing right here at the National Arts Club. For those of you who are not familiar with the National Arts Club, we are a 501c3 nonprofit based in New York City with a mission to stimulate, foster, and promote public interest in the arts. Annually, we host over 150 free programs to the public, including exhibitions, theatrical and music performances, lectures, and readings. To find out more about the club, you can visit us at nationalartsclub.org, or you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. On behalf of our architecture committee, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's event featuring Francis Greenburger, the founder, CEO, and chairman of Time Equities, Inc., who will be in conversation with Lee Skolnick, the principal of Skolnick Architecture and Design Partnership. They will be discussing their new initiative, Art Omi Pavilions, or AOP. Following the conversation will be a pre-Q&A, so please feel free to use the Q&A function for any questions you might have. And without further ado, I'm going to turn over to Lee and Francis. Please enjoy their conversation.
Thank you, Nadine, and welcome everybody. This is a very fortuitous event because as a member of the architecture committee, I was very excited to bring Art Omi and the new Art Omi Pavilions initiative to a broader audience, to a wider attention. And just to step back for a moment, some of you may not know that much about Art Omi. Art Omi is an amazing venue, an amazing site in upstate New York, not far from Hudson. That's everybody's landmark, closer to Ghent, actually. And it is a sculpture park. It is an artist in residence program. It is an educational program, a summer camp for kids. Just a tremendous place. And I was fortunate enough to meet the founder and patron, Francis Greenburger, and we became friends. And the next thing I knew, he showed me Art Omi, and I was absolutely entranced. And he had an amazing idea, which I guess had been brewing for a little while. We're going back about 12 years now, to enhance the program. It already had fine art, painting, sculpture, residencies in dance, music, photography, but there was not an architecture program. And for being an architect, I was so gratified to have someone say, you know, architecture is an art. It should be part of the program. And so we began this architecture program, which was called Architecture Omi, but now is called Art Omi Architecture. And we have a threefold kind of program. One is some of the fields have been dedicated, the sculpture park fields have been dedicated to architecture projects. And so we invite proposals from architects who are practicing to make site interventions. You know, architects, once you get out of school where you're able to let your mind run free and hone your creativity and hone your professional skills, many architects, most architects, it's sort of like the end of their ability to exercise that creativity and exploration. So our goal was to create a place where architects who are actually in practice could go back and have the opportunity to keep learning, to keep exploring. And so one of the ways we do it is through these site interventions, like the ones you're seeing on the screen right now by Stephen Hull, who's kind of a neighbor up there. But we also do exhibits in, we should talk about this. Alice Aycock, let's go back for a second, thank you. Alice Aycock is a very good friend, obviously a remarkable artist who's internationally renowned. And we talked a lot with Francis about the intersection of art, architecture, and landscape. And, hers was kind of a foundational piece for us because it combines all three. It's about an experience in the landscape. It's certainly a sculpture, a piece of artwork, but it's architectural in nature in the language that it uses. So she's sort of the exemplar of the kind of exploration that we're interested in promoting. So as I said, there are the pieces in the landscape. There are exhibits in the visitor center, which I think you'll see in a moment. So the visitor center at Art Omi is a bit a welcome center, really, but it has a place to sit and get refreshments, to look out at the beautiful landscape, to get out of the sun or the cold. But on top of that, there's a great gallery, and the gallery has rotating exhibits, and the architecture program has kind of has rights to mount exhibits at certain times of the year. So that's the second sort of lobe of Architecture Omi. We have the pieces out in the landscape. We have exhibits in the visitor center gallery. And then the third thing that we have added, and this was only added about, I think it's about 7 years ago. We were talking about how all the other art forms have a residency, and also about the fact that along with architects going into practice, not having much opportunity to stretch their creative wings, there are no architecture residencies. There are art residencies, many throughout the country and around the world. There are a couple in other countries, but there's virtually nothing in the US. And so 7 years ago, we started inviting architects from all over the world to propose projects that they would want to pursue in a 2-week residency program. And what's wonderful about it is that the mix of nationalities is just amazing. I mean, we've had residents come from 17 countries: Mexico, Palestine, India, Australia, Brazil, Puerto Rico, South Korea, Hong Kong, Chile, Egypt, Spain, Canada, Italy, Japan, Germany, Austria. And it's just an amazing array of talent and thoughtfulness. And what we wind up doing is, they come with a proposal, and we have a jury of prominent people in the architecture field, both academics and in practice, who vet these applications. But what's very interesting is once they get together and they live communally in a couple of residences on the property, and they eat together and they have crits and presentations during their 2 weeks. And inevitably, because of the interaction with others in a non-stressful, non-professional environment, their projects morph. So in fact, some participants wind up banding together as a team or as a group to do a project that is either a group project or 3 parts of a larger theme. So this has been incredibly exciting. At the end of the 2 weeks, we invite them to present, and that's some of the slides you're seeing here. They present their projects, and we bring in another set of quote unquote experts, architects, academics, critics, historians, to crit their work. And we now have 7 years worth of alumni, and they're very devoted. First of all, they're so grateful for the opportunity because it's something that is not offered anywhere, but they become real boosters for the program as well. Over time, we have presented in New York City as well, because that's where a lot of the architects hang out. So we've done that at the Center for Architecture, the AIA New York City venue, as well as the Van Allen Institute and Cooper Union. And we've invited faculties from the design schools in the area to come and participate. So that's just a very brief introduction to the architecture program. And I invite everyone to look into it and to come up and see the work, get on our mailing list for programs, which are becoming more and more frequent. And I dare say that we'll probably have some more programs at the National Academy of Arts. I'm sorry, the National Arts Club. And I do want to point out that we have a wonderful program director. Her name is Julia Van Den Hout, and she has added so much content and depth and breadth to the program that we're making inroads and making friends and connections throughout the world with the leading architects and the cutting edge of architecture. So we're very excited about the program. And as I say, we invite you to find ways to participate, or at least take a look at what we're doing, because I think that it probably is an example that would want to be copied in other places. I think architects really need the opportunity to continue to grow as artists, and the profession can be daunting. And so we're here to carry that torch and to support that mission. So with that said, I do want to pass it over to my good friend and co-conspirator, the leader of Art Omi, Francis Greenburger, to tell you about a really exciting new initiative at Art Omi.
Well, thank you, Lee. And just to give people a little context, although the architecture program is, as Lee pointed out, 10 years old, OMI itself is now in its 32nd year, I think. So our original visual arts program, writers program, all the things started a long time ago, and it has evolved over time. Sometimes people say to me, "Oh, how did you have the vision for all of this?" Well, I didn't really have the vision for all of this. It sort of came out of various conversations and energy and commitment of people like Lee, who has made our architectural program come to life in such a remarkable way, together with our curators and a board, a very active board who supports all that we do. And similarly, in all the other disciplines, we have program boards, we have directors, many of whom have been with the programs. I mean, our music director has been with the program since we started it 25 years ago. And most of the directors have been around for a long time. So that's just a little bit in terms of background. The Pavilions project is an idea that started at the OMI is technically in the township of Ghent. So sometimes I'll refer to it as OMI Ghent, just to differentiate it from the location for the new Pavilions project, which is in Chatham. It's about 15 minutes away, but it's a separate site. And even though the two organizations will be sister organizations, each one will have its own characteristics and mission. As you can see, this is the site that eventually the pavilions will be built on. And it's a spectacular site with a 270 view over the Hudson Valley, You see the Catskill Mountains in the background there. You see the Hudson River. It's extraordinary. It's an extraordinary landscape experience. So separate from all the other things that it is and will be, it is this remarkable vantage point on the Hudson Valley, and you can see all the way up to New York, all up to Albany, and if you look the other way, you can almost see New York City. And we see the program kind of as a blend of landscape, architecture, and art. And the basic vision is to present 18 highly distinguished artists and collectors who will collaborate in a kind of with world-class architects to realize these legacy exhibition buildings. The buildings will all be small to moderate in size. So that means up to 10 or 15,000 feet maximum, because the floor plate, the maximum floor plate has been set at 5,700 feet, but they can be up to 35 feet in height, so that could accommodate up to 3 floors. Most of them will be 2 floors. Some might be 1. And within each of those, either the respective artist or the respective collector will create a setting for a legacy collection that will represent them for a permanent location for the fullness of time. And there are some examples, if we think about the art world as that could represent this. If you think of collectors, so one of the first reference points that might come to mind is the Barnes collection in Philadelphia. As you recall, he was a collector of Impressionist art and could not find a satisfactory relationship with the Philadelphia Museum, and ultimately decided that his collection should be permanently exhibited actually in his own house, which was a large house, in a very particular manner that he felt the work would be best represented. And for those of you who've been there, you'll understand that. Another example would be Donald Judd, who actually bought a small town in West Texas called Marfa. And that's where he exhibits his work, as well as those of a couple of friends, Dan Flavin, who he was close to, and 1 or 2 others, but it was originally conceived around his own work. And I was rereading a book recently where Judd was quoted, and he said, you know, when you put your work into a museum, you have no control over the context in which it's presented. And of course, the work is very impacted by the context. And it's not always what the artist might think of as as the way in which they would prefer the work to be seen. And, you know, any work that's exhibited, for instance, in a group show always has a sort of different resonance than it does if it's set in its own setting. So he discussed at great length, which of course led to his vision of Marfa. And there are other examples, not too many, but there are other examples of both artists and collectors. If we go to Mass MoCA, there's the Saul LeWitt building that's solely about Saul's wall drawings. There's Christine and Andy Hall's building, which they've dedicated to the work of Kiefer, important German sculptor, etc. So those are the places on which contributed to the inspiration for this idea. Early on, I had the thought that these buildings similar kinds of buildings might be dispersed around the existing campus of Art Omi in Ghent. But eventually, for a variety of reasons, some having to do with local regulations and others having to do with the idea that this really deserved to be seen in its own context. I chose another site, which is the one that you saw pictures of, which is actually a piece of land that I had bought 40 years ago. I collect art, but I've also been known to collect beautiful land, and this was one of the prizes in my collection. So here we are, and now it's about, I don't know, 3-4 years past when the idea became more seriously developed. We had to go through a complicated entitlement process in the township of Chatham, and everybody thought it was a good idea. There were local voices that had different views about it and were worried about the effect of this important venue on their community. Anyway, all of that was addressed, and in the end, the planning board unanimously supported the project, and we got our entitlement. And now we've been building a lot of infrastructure. We put in, I'm not sure how much, 1 or 2 miles of roads, water, sewer, electric, all those kinds of things that are hidden but are essential. And we've begun to create partnerships with some artists and some collectors. We've purposely taken the selection process very slowly because we think this is something that is best developed over time, and we don't want to commit too many of the spaces we have. So we have space for 18 total. And right now, you can see the ones that have been selected, and I will take you through some images of those in a minute, and comment on sort of each one. Some of them we have images for, 1 or 2. I guess one of them has not yet been developed, and that's the Isla Pavilion. That's a three-generation collection of Latin American and South American art. And there's a foundation that supports all of this. And they actually have recently opened a center in New York and in Tribeca, and this would be an additional venue for them. But the others, you'll see the images, and I'll sort of explain each one as we go by. One of the other thoughts that come up is that artists and collectors sort of lose agency, if you will, over the cohesion of their vision as their oeuvres and their own works in the collections. And there are a few, once you sort of put it in an institutional setting in a museum, I mean, we all know that the museum has much more work in storage than it does available to be seen. So any artist or collector who donates work to a museum doesn't know how the work will be treated in the future and when it'll be exhibited and when it won't. So we also provide a way for the artist or the collector to sort of have assurance that the work will be seen on some regular basis. We have asked that each pavilion sponsor rotate at least 25 the work in the pavilion at least 25% a year, so that there will be a sense of newness, and visitors will feel when they come back that they're seeing something different than they saw the first time, that it won't grow stale. And we also have two, or actually three, buildings that will have not legacy collections, but 1 or 2 year exhibitions. And those are the one called the Biennial Exhibition Pavilion, which will be designed by Lee Skolnick, and Lee will tell you about it later. We have one called the Mini Pavilions, and I'll show you an image of that and explain it. And then also in the visitor center, we have an exhibition room. So those will be rotating more on a visitor center will probably rotate 2 or 3 times a year, and the other ones one or at least once a year or 2 every couple of years. So a lot of newness will be occurring, so that people have reason to come back, and of course they'll also get to see their old favorites. The site is actually 190 acres, and so it's quite very, very large. Probably takes 15 or 20 minutes to walk from one end to the other. So it'll be quite a day. I mean, if you really want to spend that much time there, you'll have plenty to see in a day's visit, or might even be over 2 days. Or you can just see 1 or 2 or 3 pavilions, and you'll have a more bite-sized experience. It's also proximate, and this is important, to other major art venues, Storm King, for example, or Dia in Beacon, Art Omi, which we talked about before, Sculpture Park and Architecture Park, and the Clark Museum in Williamstown, and Mass MoCA, proximate to the Clark. So somebody who wants to make a weekend or a several-day visit in the region will have a very, very rich experience. With that, let's go look at some of the actual building images, so you can have a sense of what these pavilions will look like. So this is the first, this is where people will arrive. It's the visitor center. It'll have a cafe. It'll have an exhibition room, or actually 1.5 rooms. And it'll also have an educational wing, because as Lee had mentioned, Oh My Ghent has a robust educational program, but we don't have good space for winter programming. We use a shared space, and this will allow the educational program to have its own place. This is a sign that, can we go back to the other image? Yeah. This is a sign of the cafe. You see the outdoor seating around it, and the building from this particular vantage point. Also, when visitors arrive, they'll be given fobs or entry device to get into the individual pavilions that will otherwise be locked, and register and that sort of thing. Okay, if we can go to the next image. This is the education room, which you can see probably has about 20 or so students that or kids that can be envisioned. Our programs mostly go from probably around 5 or 6 up to 16 or 17 teenagers. They're different programs, they're not mixed together. And it is an immensely, particularly our summer program is an immensely popular program. It's a summer camp. We have an outdoor campus, which of course is not suitable in the winter, which is why we need this. But our camp is so popular that actually registration for the camp, we open it on a particular day at a particular time of day, and it's filled within an hour for the whole summer. So we have incredible education leader, Sasha Zuccarella, who's run the program since the inception, also many, many years, and a phenomenal staff, and it's quite a special moment for the kids who are lucky enough to get into it. Let's move forward with the image. So this is the first artist pavilion. Alice Aycock, and Lee has mentioned to her, to you. Many of you will be familiar with her work. So in this particular case, Alice herself has not I don't think she's educated as an architect, but she certainly has a lot of skills. I think her father was a general contractor, as I recall.
Yes.
And so she's extremely familiar with it. And so she kind of came up with a concept of the building that she wanted herself. And this is it. And as you can see, it's a fairly, in some ways, it relates to a kind of vernacular agricultural building in the area. The actual building type is pretty simple, and it has kind of a corrugated metal exterior. But it has this very dramatic roof line on one side, which goes from peak to ground. So it overhangs the side of the building. And it has this huge skylight or sky window, however you want to think of it. I think it's about 15 feet wide, and then it's peak to ground. I'm not sure of the distance, but I would imagine it's 30 or 40 feet. So it's very dramatic, and then she collaborated with another architectural firm to do the construction documents. Somebody who had done some work with her previously, once in a building that I developed in my life as a real estate developer, and then later she was invited to do another installation in one of Helmut Jahn's office towers. Anyway, she turned to the Jahn firm to help her do the construction documents, which they did, but it was her design. Next image. So Tadaki Kuiyama and Rokuko Nato are Japanese-American artists. Tadaki, they're married, it's a couple. Tadaki is a minimalist and works mostly, he has done some two-dimensional work, painting, but he's mostly known for his work in metal, and also tends to be two-dimensional, and is very, very prominent in particularly, he's known throughout the world, but particularly prominent in Japan. And his wife, Rokuko Nato, works in a completely different medium. She works in paper, but she's equally extraordinary. And they've often exhibited together, even though their work is different, but it sort of contrasts in a nice way. And so they're doing, this building is a joint building. Unfortunately, Tadaki passed away, I guess about a year ago, in the middle of the project, but he was very committed to it. There was a full-page obituary in the Times, which talked about his important career, and the architect they selected to collaborate with is none other than their daughter, who's a prominent architect in Germany, but she's designing the building for this site, and this is the building that she envisions. And as you can see, it's very much in that kind of minimalist tradition, which is represented in her father's work and to some degree, but in a different way, in her mother's work. Next image. So Michael and Susan Hort are a couple that have been collectors most of their lives, probably for the last, I think since the 80s, so the last 45 years. They have been collectors of contemporary art. They have a very large collection. They have their approach to collecting is that they try to make their decisions early in artists' lives. And they like to collect in depth. So typically when they identify an artist of interest, they'll buy 5 or 6 works rather than only 1 or 2. They have a remarkable eye and sensibility, and represent, and in their collection is a lot of the major names that you know from the last 40 years. And as I think I don't know what I mentioned, but they have 6,000 works of art in their collection, so it's vast. And they have no permanent exhibition venue, although they do have a large building in Tribeca, which has some space, and they live in part of it. But this will be a permanent legacy collection, a legacy place for their collection. And this building is being designed in collaboration with BKSK, who I introduced them to because I felt that there would be a good chemistry between them, which there was. And this is the building that BKSK is envisioning for them. This one is so far will be the largest one of the pavilions. This one will be about 11,000 feet as it's currently conceived. And the next image. So this is one of the 3 venues where we're going to have rotating collections, and this is a somewhat unique concept. Before we get to the image, the concept here is that, you know, we often don't spend a lot of time, you know, if we're in a museum, we'll spend typically, you know, a few seconds looking at different works, or we may contemplate something for a minute or 2, but, you know, we tend to move on. And the thought here is that some work deserves, or work can deserve, really outstanding work could be interesting to be meditated or time, a longer period of time, 10 or 15 minutes spent with certain key works. So the mini pavilions are, you'll see very small venues that envision 1 to 3 works of a particular artist being exhibited in them. And these will be typically for periods of maybe a year or maybe a little shorter, depends on the work availability and on a variety of things. So let's go to the image now. So this is being designed by a firm called So Ill. So Ill is a young firm, although they were a lot younger some years ago when they first showed up at OMI. in which they were really just in their infancy. They were hardly a firm, and they were part of our residency. And but since then, whenever that was, 5 or 8 years ago, they've grown to become a very important firm because they're extremely imaginative. They're currently designing a new museum for Williams College, and they have a long list, a relatively long list for a young firm, a very distinguished assignments. And so what you're looking at here is a concept that they came up with. It's a bonnet, or think of it as a lampshade. It's about 40 feet in diameter, and it's quite high. And it's really a shade or bonnet over the actual mini pavilions, which I'll show you in a minute. But this in the landscape is obviously going to be quite a beacon, very, very dramatic. And it's covered by porous material, either they thought of cloth at one point, or it would probably be some sort of metal grating that's porous so that wind can blow through it. And so they're developing the concept now. Incidentally, this, as well as a number of our buildings, were all the result of competitions in which multiple architectural firms participated. This particular case, I think 5 firms or 6 firms participated. And of course, we chose the one that we felt addressed the particular site in a way that we felt was most imaginative and most suitable to the program that we were envisioning. Every one of the proposals that were made were each very imaginative, very exciting. Of course, it's very, very hard to decide, but in the end, so we'll won fair and square. And so we were happy to have it. And we used the same process in a number of the other buildings. Let's go to the next image. These are the individual little pavilion boxes. I see we're running long, but I'll try to go quick. And each of these will be 300 to 500 square feet. So they're not that big, but they're not that small either. And they're all under the bonnet. And each one of these would contain 1 to 3 works by a different artist. And they'll be very comfortable seating in them. So if you want to spend 10 minutes or so there, your back won't be breaking, and you'll have a time to take it. And it's envisioned that each building will probably only have one or a related group of visitors in it. So it's not the museum experience where there are 20 people swarming around. You'll have your own little time slot in each one of these buildings. We're working out the details of that now. Next image. Here you see it set in the landscape, quite dramatic, as you can tell. Next. So this is Turquoise Dyson, another important artist who we're pleased to be working with. Her work is currently being exhibited at the Whitney Biennial. She has a whole roof terrace there. She happened to be there. And I think she's doing something in the Venice Biennale. She's very much at the moment. But anyway, a phenomenal artist. And she's collaborating with Gluckman Tang. Richard Gluckman is a very important architect in the architectural world and the art world. To some people credit him with really creating the modern gallery space, which we all know is a pretty simple concept. It's concrete floors and white walls, but as you know, it sort of dominates galleries around the world. And I think Richard was one of the first people to design that in the early days of Soho. And Tang is his partner, who I think is a more recent addition, but anyway. But he and Torquaze have been working very closely, and this is, as you can see, it's quite a dramatic building. What she's envisioning. It's subterranean in the sense that it part of it, the access, you sort of come down off the hill a bit and walk in from a lower level. So if you're up on the ridge, what you'll see is the top of the building, not the entry. Next image. Okay. I'm going to turn this now over to Lee, because this is a building that he's been working on and developing an idea around our program. Just to say, this one was sort of inspired by the Venice Biennale. I was there with my co-founder, curator, Natalie Diaz. And she said to me, well, why don't we have something where people who don't want to create a legacy pavilion, but want to just exhibit for 1 or 2 years, like the Venice Biennale, something that would offer them that opportunity. And I said, it sounds like an interesting idea. So here it is. Lee, over to you.
Thanks, Francis. So we can go to the first slide. So in designing this, what was very different about it from all the others is you don't know what's going to be exhibited there. And so it's more like designing a gallery like you would expect to find in the city, in Chelsea and Tribeca, on the one hand. On the other hand, it really is part of the visitor experience in the sense that because it has changing exhibits, you'll always want to come back and see what the next show is. And it's situated strategically adjacent to the visitor center. So it's really part of the kind of choreography of moving through the site. You arrive, you go to the visitor center, and you might very well take your first right turn and encounter the Biennale Exhibition Pavilion. What was programmed was to have 2 gallery spaces so that we could mount 2, we could take the whole place and mount one show, large show of one artist, but we could also have 2 separate shows. We could have assemblies there, lectures, etc. But I didn't want the pavilion to assert itself too strongly, because to me the other pavilions are the sort of sculptures in the landscape. Having said that, this is almost a perfect exemplar of the mission of the architecture program at OMI, because this is very much about art, architecture, and landscape. And what you'll see, if we go to the next one, what you'll see is my initial sketches. So how do you take 2 galleries and join them, allow them to have each to have a discrete character, but at the same time come together to form one experience? So we can go to the next one. So I started to think about a building that would grow right out of the landscape. And one of the interesting aspects of this building is it's going to be constructed using 3D printed technology. So we also wanted to have it be kind of a showcase for what you can do with 3D printing in its present form or as it's developing. And so you see the curving wall, that would all be 3D printed and would be kind of a retaining wall and a wrapper for the galleries. So we can run through this quickly. Here's a sketch showing how the land rises up around to embrace the buildings, and then the wall embraces the 2 pavilions inside the wrapper. You have the next one. And here's how we dealt with the idea of 2 galleries. So you come in at the bottom of this drawing, the wall to your left, that curving wall is growing out of the landscape. And then we have two equally sized galleries with light coming in from up above. We wanted all the wall space that we could get. By the way, that the galleries you'll see have rounded corners. That's actually a function of the 3D printing process. At present, you can't make a sharp right-angled corner using that process. There'll always be a little bit of a radius to it. So we decided to make a feature out of that. So if we go to the next, so here you see the approach. So this is as if you're coming from the visitor center and you see this retaining wall on the left. And it feels like you're walking down into a lower level, but you're actually just staying at the same level while the wall wraps up around you. And then the two galleries assert themselves with these curved roofs. It was very much a response to the land, which is beautifully undulating. Columbia County characteristically has these rolling hills, and I wanted the building to look like it was really of the landscape. I think there's, yeah, so you can see from different vantage points, it's going to almost disappear and then it'll reassert itself. And then on the inside, you know, as Francis was saying about some of the other galleries, you know, it's I guess of the Gluckman heritage, you know, concrete floors, white walls, light, evenly distributed light coming in. And because we cannot speculate on what types of art might be in there, we're trying to make it as flexible as possible. So just a little peek at how that process works. And we're really excited about seeing all this realized. Francis told me about this idea many, many years ago. He took me around to look at other land that might be candidate, but the property that he chose is just magnificent. So we're all really excited to see it come together. I rushing through because if there are any questions, I wanted to give people a chance to ask us while we're all still together.
Thank you so much, Francis and Lee. This is truly an amazing space. So thank you for bringing it to life for us. While you were speaking, I did a quick Google search, and it's about a 3-hour drive from New York City. So I'm definitely planning on coming up there to visit.
Beautiful train ride also.
I was gonna say it's probably like the Metro North that goes right up by the Hudson Valley. Yeah, beautiful. So there are a few questions. Some of them you address, but I just want to ask them anyway, just for completion. One viewer is asking, so are visitors able to tour all the architectural sites and are any or many in view of the visitor center? This viewer is concerned because they didn't see any paths, but I think it's just sort of walking through the land, I would assume. Is that correct?
Well, there's a central spine that you're not seeing yet on the diagrams that goes down the ridge line of the property, and the pavilions are to the right or the left of that center spine. And as I mentioned, the walk from one end to the other could be as much as 20 minutes. So bring your walking shoes, and again, you can spend as much or as little time. I mean, seeing the whole thing would be extremely exhausting, but you know, you'll choose your time frame and which things are most compelling to you.
Okay, so choose your own adventure. And picnicking and that's allowed? Or...
Absolutely, of course.
Oh my God.
There's picnicking, there's walking, there's it's for user-friendly consumption in
Sounds like
all its different aspects.
Sounds like an absolutely magical place. I did share the link to the website in the chat for everyone, for everyone's reference, artomi.org. And one last question, interesting. This viewer is saying that the site is clearly former farmland. Is consideration being given to environmental issues as in native pollinator plantings, rejections of herbicides, perhaps using part of the land for what it was for its original purpose? So I guess farming.
Well, very appropriate question. And yes, we've addressed this, and let me explain how we've addressed it. The first thing that I should mention is that the main road that services this is sort of down at the bottom of the hill there. So the first thing we did is we created a 150-foot buffer along that road where the land will remain unchanged from its current natural vegetation and the way it exists and always exists. So in terms of the community itself, the uniqueness of the site is that the site is not actually visible from that many vantage points because it's very high up within the community. And if you're driving along that road, which many people do, including me, the experience will remain unchanged because what's going on is beyond your visual experience as you are going down the road, which is where other houses are. Next, after that 150-foot buffer, we actually have reserved a pasture for cow grazing, which is how the land has been used traditionally. And we have a farmer who has traditionally used the land, and he has agreed to leave his cows in that lower portion. So you will be past the pavilions a little bit further down the hill. There will be cows. In terms of vegetation, the landscape architects who are working on it have been directed, and it's part of our commitment to only use indigenous plants, and that we're not going to change the landscape except whatever intervention is immediately required for the buildings. So we're not reshaping the land, etc. It will be as close to its original condition as it possibly can. The road up to the building is a porous road. It's not a paved road. It's packed, and the complex will. We're going to have a solar field for electricity. So it is completely conceived around the highest environmental standards. We've also been fortunate in having received support from the state of New York, who've embraced this project, and both as a part of our agreement with the planning board, as well as with the state, fully embraces and supports this environmental approach, as do we. So a lot of thought has been given to it, and we will continue to give thought to it.
That's great. Thank you so much, just for me personally. We have time for one more question. Will there be future architectural competitions for the remaining pavilions?
Yes, I imagine there will be. I have a bias. As I mentioned, I'm in my professional life, I'm a real estate developer. And I have many close relationships with architects, including Lee. And as much as I respect each of their work, I found that not every brilliant architect necessarily has the best solution for every site. And when you do a competition, I find that lots of ideas that you may never have imagined come to the fore, and you don't know where it's going to lead till you see the different ideas that architects bring to the site, no matter how great an architect they may be. I built a tower in New York. We did a competition when we built it. It was designed by Helmut Jahn. And then when I was going to build one in Chicago, which I just completed, which was Helmut's hometown, he said, well, I hope you're not going to make me go through another competition, Francis. We've been working together for, at that point, probably 5 or 10 years. And I said, Helmut, I'm sorry you are. He said, oh, you're just driving me nuts. But Helmut is a very fierce competitor. We had 6 firms participate. They all came up with interesting ideas, but fair and square, Helmut won the second time. So it's a process I believe in, and we will continue to utilize it.
Great. Thank you. I'd like to close out with echoing the sentiment of one more viewer's comments who said, fascinating project combining art, architecture, and landscape/nature. Thank you. Can't wait to visit. Same goes for myself. Thank you so much again to Francis and Lee for taking the time to talk about what is truly a spectacular project and site, and I cannot wait to visit, as well as I'm sure everybody on this call. And don't forget to visit the nationalartsclub.org for more programming. We are closing for the summer. Tomorrow is our last day of the season. Even more reason to go visit Art Omi while we're closed. Again, thank you so much to both of you. Be safe, everyone, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.